Here's what you're missing out on if you've never eaten a real Maryland crab cake before 4 in the morning on the Chesapeake Bay. Today we're following one single day, from a waterman's dark morning on the water to a packed dinner table that night, to show you exactly what goes into the dish Maryland refuses to compromise on. Grab a bib because this story starts right here on a dock before the sun even thinks about rising. It's still dark when the first boats leave the dock, engines echoing across still water, running lights the only thing visible for miles. Watermen have worked the Chesapeake Bay this way for generations, pulling wire crab pots up from the muddy bottom one after another, hour after hour, long before most of the state wakes up. Each pot comes up dripping, snapping claws visible immediately, and an experienced waterman can sort keepers from throwbacks almost without looking, hands moving faster than seems physically reasonable. By mid-morning, the boat is heading back toward the dock, crates stacked high with blue crabs, the bay's most famous export and the entire reason this whole day exists in the first place. At the dock, the crabs get weighed, sorted, and loaded onto trucks almost immediately. Since freshness here isn't a marketing term, it's the entire business model. From the dock, the crabs travel to a picking house, where workers sit at long stainless steel tables extracting meat by hand, a skill that takes years to genuinely master. This part surprises most outsiders. There's no machine shortcut here. Real lump crab meat has to be picked by hand, carefully, to keep the prized large pieces intact instead of shredded into mush. Pickers separate the meat into grades as they go. Jumbo lump for the large, intact pieces, regular lump for smaller chunks, and claw meat for the darker, more intensely flavored pieces from the claws themselves. That grading matters enormously because a real Maryland crab cake lives or dies by which grade ends up in the mix. By early afternoon, the picked meat arrives at a kitchen where the real debate begins. Here's what almost nobody outside Maryland realizes. The true Maryland crab cake barely uses filler at all, just enough egg, mayonnaise, and a light touch of seasoning, usually Old Bay, to hold everything together without hiding the crab meat itself. Chefs here consider excessive breadcrumbs something close to an insult, evidence that a kitchen doesn't trust its own crab meat enough to let it speak for itself. The seasoning question alone can start real arguments in Maryland kitchens. Some swear by broiling instead of frying, insisting a golden broiled top preserves the crab's natural sweetness better than any fryer ever could. Others insist a quick pan-sear with real butter creates a crust worth defending. Either way, the crab meat itself always remains the actual star, never buried under sauce or filler, the way lesser versions elsewhere often are. By late afternoon, the finished crab cakes move from kitchen to table, arriving at restaurants along the harbor just as the dinner rush begins to build. Walk along Baltimore's inner harbor around this time, and you'll see servers moving briskly between tables, trays balanced with crab cakes headed toward diners who've often traveled specifically for this exact meal. Some of these harbor restaurants have served the same basic preparation for decades, refusing to chase trends or reinvent something that never actually needed fixing in the first place. Today, you can see photos of old fishing fleets and picking houses framed inside these modern restaurants, hanging near the counter like living history, connecting the plate back to the boat. As evening settles in, families gather at newspaper-covered tables, wooden mallets in hand, cracking whole steamed crabs dusted heavily in Old Bay seasoning right alongside their crab cakes. It's a ritual that turns dinner into a full-contact activity, shells piling up in the center of the table as conversation gets louder and hands get messier by the minute. You'll see tourists awkwardly attempting their first crab cracking session, while locals demonstrate the proper technique without even looking up from their own plate. You'll see families who've gathered around this exact ritual for generations, the mallets and seasoning, as much a tradition as the food itself. Even visitors who've never handled a whole crab in their life somehow leave the table completely transformed by the experience. Old Bay dust on their fingers and a newfound respect for how much work went into that single crab cake sitting beside their cracked shells. Some of the most respected crab houses in Baltimore have waiting lists that stretch for hours on summer weekends. Families willing to wait simply because they know exactly what's waiting for them at the end of the line. Locals will tell you that's not exaggeration. A real Maryland crab cake genuinely justifies the wait, the cost, and the mess that inevitably follows. The dish stayed remarkably consistent for generations, even as seafood trends elsewhere constantly shifted toward heavier sauces and fillers designed to stretch cheaper ingredients further. Yet the classic Maryland crab cake remains exactly what it always was: mostly crab, barely held together, seasoned simply, and never apologized for. It's labor-intensive enough to require an entire day's chain of watermen, pickers, and chefs working in sequence, yet simple enough on the plate that the crab itself never gets lost in the process. That contradiction, enormous effort producing something so deliberately understated, might be the real secret behind why Marylanders refuse to compromise on it. As the sun sets over the harbor, the same boats that left before dawn now sit quietly at the dock, work finished for the day, while restaurants across the city stay busy late into the evening. The entire chain, from wire pot to picking table to dinner plate, happens in a single day, faster than most people realize when they finally take that first bite. So next time you eat a real Maryland crab cake, remember everything that stood behind it that same day. The pre-dawn boat, the hand-picked meat, the barely there filler, and generations of watermen and chefs who never needed to cut corners. It's a small taste of an entire day's work compressed into a single plate. If you enjoyed following this journey behind the Maryland crab cake, let us know down in the comments below. Tell us which American city and its signature food we should explore together next. Until then, grab a mallet, crack a shell, and we'll see you on the next story.